With the release of Marvel Studios' Spider-Man Far From Home, everyone's favourite friendly neighbourhood superhero swings onto cinema screens for his 7th live-action solo adventure. In this video, I aim to rank them all, from the original Raimi Trilogy to the Amazing Spider-Man efforts and the 2 recent Marvel Cinematic Universe installments, in order from my least to most favourite. As this video focuses solely on theatrical live-action Spidey flicks, I'll be skipping the animated Into the Spider-Verse, the 70s television movie, the ensemble MCU flicks, and the Spidey-free Venom. Before we get into this, keep in mind this ranking reflects my own personal opinion and does not aim to present a definitive ranking of the films. Chances are your opinions will be different to mine, and that's the beauty of it. So don't be anything less than super heroic down in the comments. And also, before we go any further, just a heads up, as we will be discussing Spider-Man Far From Home, I won't get too spoilery, but I will be discussing some of the finer plot points. And at that, let's swing into it. Kicking us off at number 7, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Easily the worst of the Spidey flicks and a true contender for worst comic book movie of all time. The movie builds on the already rocky but reasonable foundations of Amazing Spider-Man, but balloons itself into an overloaded disaster, filled to the brim with a million storylines that get tangled and don't go anywhere, character development that gets bogged down and fizzles out, action sequences that are so clogged with CGI explosions that they're not even that fun to watch, and a number of awful villains, none of which have good motives, believability, or performances behind them. Jamie Foxx's Electro is one of the worst comic villains put to screen, and Dane DeHaan's Harry Osborn is one-dimensional, tedious, and dull. And that's saying a lot about a character that was once played by James Franco. There was just so much going on in here that it's easy to get lost and almost impossible to form any kind of attachment to anything. Even the film's most intimate and heartfelt moments, the exploration of the Peter-Gwen relationship, becomes mind-numbing in the way that it's constantly on again, off again, on again, off again for 2.5 hours straight, and then she just drops dead at the end. Despite the filmmakers and Garfield's efforts to make Spidey a little funnier than in the first Amazing Spider-Man, the even darker tone is just a drag. It feels too little, too late. 6. Spider-Man 3. One of the most notorious comic book flicks of all time, Spidey 3 takes the more is more approach and delivers an enormous, overcrowded, and bombastic superhero epic. Sadly, the film's blatant effort to completely outdo the previous 2 movies, right at the time comic book cinema was getting bigger and more ambitious, is its downfall. Spider-Man 3 is crammed with huge action set pieces and enormous special effects sequences. It shoved in 3 villains, each with their own motives. They're not working together. It's almost like the writers just had 3 film ideas and crammed it into one. There's also multiple side stories and character arcs that never feel like they're properly developed and are not allowed enough screen time to do so. While a technological leap over the previous 2, the movie's supercharged nature makes it feel less intimate, and its emphasis on trying to make everything cooler means that the narrative development and focus of the originals is just nowhere to be seen. It's certainly not a boring movie by any stretch, it's actually quite entertaining, but it has nowhere near the same level of enjoyability as the first 2. It all just feels a bit much, proving that bigger isn't always better. 5. The Amazing Spider-Man. Only 10 years after the original movie, Amazing Spider-Man goes back to the beginning and treads old ground. To differentiate itself, it mixes a few things up. MJ is swapped out for Gwen Stacy, Peter's background is fleshed out a bit more, and there's an obvious tonal shift. But no matter how much of it is different, watching it feels very much been here, seen it all before, why do we need to see it again, and so soon? Despite being very same, however, it tells its origin story reasonably well and has better narrative consistency than Spider-Man 3, though it does try to world build a little too quickly in an attempt to catch up to where Raimi's trilogy left off. Garfield's take on Peter Parker and Spider-Man just isn't my favourite. Despite some great trademark Spidey wit and classic Spidey gags in the first suit-up scene, the character becomes more and more serious as the film goes on, leaving us with easily the most boring and least comic accurate screen adaptation of the character. The film's villain villain, the Lizard, is pretty lackluster as well. With average CGI and an ill-developed motive, he's just not believable. Tonally, the movie doesn't know if it wants to be a comic book flick or a dark and broody young adult drama, and feels very muddled and too far away from the source for my liking. 4. Spider-Man Homecoming. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's take on the Spider-Man character is easily the best we've ever seen on the big screen, and Spider-Man Homecoming is one of the most enjoyable and most fun Spidey adventures yet. Marvel finally taking the helm of the Spidey franchise and setting it in their already expanded and established universe does the film wonders. It doesn't have to bog down with exposition like Amazing 1, and can jump straight in, feeling incredibly fresh, with villains and supporting characters that feel layered and already three-dimensional. Marvel even fixed a lot of issues that plagued the earlier films, most importantly getting the tone right, delivering a fun, energetic and exciting movie, with a Spider-Man that's funny, sarcastic, confident and full of wisecracks. It's the comic accurate Spidey that we've always deserved on the screen. Some of the film's other elements aren't as accurate as, say, the Raimi films, but it allows for a new, unpredictable take on the franchise. Homecoming sidesteps the traditional origin story, starting with Peter having already learned to live with his powers. The fun part about this iteration is not seeing how he got the powers, but how he learns to harness them and use them to the fullest. The exploration of a superpowered human battling with his inner turmoil and self-imposed duties while growing up, being responsible and doing schoolwork is at the heart of the film. It's a truly human story that puts it on the same level as Spider-Man 2. 3. Spider-Man 2. Arguably the first superhero movie to cut right to the core of a comic book story. One that deals with the human element more than the superhuman element. A movie that puts complete and total emphasis on character and breaks down their emotional cores in an existential manner. This is a movie where Peter Parker spends the entire middle act out of the spider suit without his powers, and it's every bit as riveting as watching Spidey swing about New York or fighting crime. And the greatest thing is, it does it all without trying to be dark or being pretentious about it. A true human story pitting a real person against the strangest of odds. Spider-Man 2 has its fair dosage of camp and corn, but certainly not to the same level as the first. It is, however, amped up with melodrama and plenty of over-the-top moments, making it a product of its time, but one that doesn't really feel that dated. Everything in this just about tops the first. The cinematic design is more refined and slicker, and character performances are even better. I love the horror movie elements that Raimi dragged into this, not afraid to break the boundaries of the comic book genre years before Christopher Nolan did. 2. Spider-Man Far From Home. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's take on the Spider-Man character is easily the best we've ever seen on the big screen. This one is easily my favourite of the modern Spidey films, and everything I've wanted from one since the early 2000s. As a bright and punchy palette cleanser to the dark and depressing Avengers Endgame, it sidesteps any of the dark tones explored in the Amazing films, doing a wonderful job at delivering a highly vibrant, exciting and spectacular high fantasy comic book action adventure, the kind of which it's impossible not to be left smiling from beginning to end while clenched tightly to the edge of your seat, making for an almost perfect Spidey adventure. The movie jumps between enormous superhero epic and teen rom-com, continuing on with the John Hughes-esque threads of Homecoming in such a beautiful way, once again delivering a unique MCU adventure and a fantastically styled and toned Spider-Man film. Action sequences are exciting and mind-blowing, and the film's villain Mysterio is complex and intriguing. He's not only one of the most interesting and entertaining villains in the MCU, but one of the best from any Spider-Man movie, leading to some pretty incredible mind-bending sequences and fanciful twists and turns. Holland continues to prove that he is a commendable Peter Parker and Spidey, delivering the best screen portrayal yet. And coming in as my #1 favourite live-action Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man. An undeniable classic of the genre, one which bridged the gap between the softer, cornier comic book fare of the 80s and 90s and the larger, darker, more mature superhero flicks of today. Revisiting Spider-Man at least a decade since I last viewed it, I was surprised how well it actually holds up against the better Marvel films of today. Yes, there's a lot of camp with a side of cheese and corn in here, and the classic 30-year-old as a high school teenager is laughable today, but it's all part of the fun, well and truly made up for by by the movie's brilliant storytelling, great character setups, and still enjoyable comic-like production design. No, Maguire's Spider-Man doesn't hold a candle to the more comic-accurate portrayal delivered by Holland, but he puts a great spin on the role, with the film's wackiness giving it an extra punch. Otherwise, most other elements of the film are fairly true to source, perhaps even more so than other interpretations. While a little over the top and ridiculous, Willem Dafoe's take on the Green Goblin is incredibly enjoyable to watch and a screen favourite villain. It goes without saying, Spider-Man is one of the strongest superhero origin films and easily one of the most comic-y. It's vibrant, punchy, goofy, and a whole lot of damn fun. It has its characters, story, and message at its heart and pulls it off beautifully. And at that, it's over to you, true believers. I want to know, how do you personally rank the Spider-Man movies from best to worst? And if you want to go the extra mile, how do you rank the Spider-Man actors from best to worst? Fire away in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. But once again, as always, guys, stay heroic down there. We all have different thoughts and opinions, and everybody's counts. Nuff said. Excelsior! If this is your first time viewing one of my videos and you'd like to see more like it in the future, then please don't forget to hit that big old subscribe button up on your screen, as well as that like button down below for that little extra support. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.